Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to confront a hidden architecture in your mind that might actually be keeping your bank account completely stagnant. We often think of financial growth purely as a matter of math, spreadsheets, and cold hard logic, but there is a deeply rooted psychological layer that governs exactly how we interact with our money. Today, we're unpacking the science-backed reasons why our brains sometimes actively fight against our own financial well-being, prioritizing immediate right-now survival over long-term growth.
Ever met someone who works incredibly hard, saves absolutely every single dollar they can, but the second the conversation turns to the stock market, they become visibly anxious? Maybe, just maybe, that person is even you. We're so quick to judge, right? Assuming they're just lazy, bad with money, or just really love the safety of a 0.01% interest savings account. But psychology tells us a completely different story. To them, the idea of investing feels less like a path to wealth and more like walking blindly into a trap. This intense fear isn't a flaw, it's actually a highly adapted psychological survival mechanism forged in the fires of past instability.
And this perfectly highlights the core battle going on inside your head right now. On one side, you've got your logical brain. It gets inflation, understands compound interest, and it clearly sees investing as the smart path to long-term wealth. But right across from it, your survival brain. This part of your mind was hijacked by past instability, and it actively shuts down all that logical planning. It perceives the risks of investing as a dangerous trap that could literally jeopardize your basic safety.
So, to bridge this gap, we're going to decode 6 key psychological barriers. We'll hit the financial fear trap, loss aversion and pain, survival and uneasy rest, rigid minds and blame, the identity misalignment, and finally, trusting your future self. Our goal here is simple. Replace financial shame with profound understanding.
All right, Section 1, the financial fear trap. And spoiler alert, it is not about intelligence.
So here's the crucial point. Your fear of the market, it's not a lack of financial knowledge, not at all. It's a symptom of a nervous system wired to expect danger. When you experience early instability, your brain literally adapts to prioritize immediate, tangible safety. It develops what we call survival wiring. This is a subconscious psychological adaptation that places zero value on long-term growth because from its perspective, the long-term just isn't guaranteed. Your brain is simply using its intelligence to protect you from a world that once felt incredibly unsafe.
Moving right along to Section 2, loss aversion and pain. This is where we hit the emotional overload.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how our brains mathematically distort reality. Behavioral psychology proves something wild. Humans are notoriously terrible at calculating probability. But man, we are absolute experts at feeling pain. We are actually wired to feel the pain of a loss nearly twice as strongly as we feel the joy of an equal gain. Think about that for a second. For someone terrified of investing, their brain doesn't see a potential 10% return. It is entirely consumed by the blinding, flashing red light of a potential 10% loss. This emotional overload completely overwhelms the thinking, rational brain. You aren't calculating odds anymore. You're just reacting to a perceived threat.
And because of this massive emotional overload, you basically stay frozen. While smart investors use cognitive reflection to question their first instinct to run away, folks stuck in the grip of loss aversion stay paralyzed. They choose the supposed certainty of cash. They hold on to it so tightly, even as inflation actively, literally eats away its value to the world around them. They are essentially sacrificing actual growth for the mere illusion of safety.
Let's dive into Section 3, survival and uneasy rest, the echoes of childhood. If we look at developmental psychology, there is a fascinating, if somewhat heartbreaking timeline. For a lot of people, the fear of investing is a direct echo of being a kid who just had to grow up way too fast. Look at this progression. It starts in childhood, with chronic stress and instability, realizing you can't rely on consistent support. Moving into adolescence, you take on early responsibility, developing this trait called survival independence. You learn you can only trust what you handle completely alone. And then we hit adulthood, and that translates into devastating financial paralysis. Because investing feels like depending on an uncontrollable system, your nervous system just completely rejects it.
This creates what's known as the uneasy rest pattern. It's wild, but people with this trait associate active struggle with safety. Because they faced early responsibility, working hard and struggling feels useful, familiar, and strangely comforting to their nervous system. But passive income? If money is growing on its own during a period of calm, their chronic stress adaptations kick right in. Passive income feels dangerous, uneasy, and too good to be true. Their nervous system stays on high alert waiting for the other shoe to drop simply because they literally do not know how to rest safely.
Okay, Section 4, Rigid Minds and Blame. This is all about avoiding nuance and risk.
So fear of investing is heavily reinforced by cognitive rigidity, which is basically the inability to think flexibly about risk. People with a high fear of the market often view the world in extreme black and white. To them, the stock market is either a guaranteed overnight miracle or it's an absolute complete scam designed to steal your hard-earned cash. There's no in between. This rigid thinking makes it impossible to handle the nuance required for long-term wealth building. Risk isn't a single event, it's a spectrum. But because navigating that spectrum takes difficult cognitive effort, they stick to what's comfortable, even if it keeps them totally stagnant.
And this rigidity often partners up with what psychology calls an external locus of control. That's the belief that your financial life is dictated by outside forces rather than your own decisions. When someone is terrified of investing, they spend their energy focusing on market crashes, blaming a rigged economy, the government, or just bad luck. Why? Because it acts as a brilliant self-protective shield. By blaming the system for their lack of growth, they don't have to look for education or solutions, and most importantly, they completely avoid the terrifying personal risk of trying and failing.
Section 5. The Identity Misalignment. Let's talk about the secret sabotage of guilt.
Now, what's really interesting here is how your own internal identity can secretly sabotage your goals. People like us don't own assets. If you grew up hearing or believing something like this, your brain is going to actively resist any action that doesn't match how you see yourself. Your brain craves alignment. If you were implicitly taught to feel guilt for wanting more than just the absolute bare basics to survive, your subconscious will absolutely step in to sabotage your investment goals so that your reality matches your internal identity.
Psychology shows us that kids who took on too much responsibility often carry this deep-seated guilt for needing. As adults, this manifests as apologizing for wanting financial success or feeling that getting wealthy is somehow a burden on others. You remain entirely focused purely on surviving because your identity just hasn't aligned yet with a person who actually deserves to thrive. You literally feel guilty for wanting to win. Which brings us to our final part, Section 6, Trusting Your Future Self and Realigning That Identity.
So if you're recognizing your own fears in this explainer today, the absolute most important takeaway is this. Psychology does not call you bad with money, and it certainly doesn't call you unintelligent. It recognizes that you learned responsibility before you were given safety. You learned strength before you were allowed to grow. Your nervous system adapted to immense pressure early on just to protect you. But true healing means recognizing that you are no longer in that constant danger. You can finally let your guard down just enough to plan for tomorrow.
And this brilliantly illustrates the final cure, which happens in 3 steps. Step 1, acknowledge that your financial fear is just an old survival pattern. Step 2, let go of the guilt associated with wanting more than just basic survival. And step 3, trust your future self. Healing doesn't mean becoming reckless with your cash. It means replacing those old, rigid survival mechanics with a new mindset that embraces the cognitive effort of calculated risk. It means finally letting your money work for you rather than you just working for it.
So, what does this all mean for you? I'll leave you with this question. Will you trade the comfort of your old survival patterns for the unstoppable growth of a new identity? The moment you decide to align with the person you are becoming, rather than being anchored by the fears of your past, is the exact moment your financial future becomes truly limitless. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. And remember, once you understand the hidden architecture of your own mind, you stop noticing what others miss, and you start building the future you actually deserve.